So yeah, talking about equity splits that won't hurt you later. So the things you need to consider, we're looking at how much should each founder own. Equity, your equity split should reflect your risk, your role, and your responsibility. RRR. Your equity split should reflect each founder's risk, the risk they are taking on, their roles, and their responsibility. And primarily, you can measure risk in terms of investment. So, time and money investment. If I'm quitting my job to invest my time into the startup, working 9 to 5 for the startup, that's a lot of investment. That's a lot of risk if it doesn't work. If I'm putting in say 80% of the capital requirement, that's a lot of risk on my part. So the higher the risk I am putting in, or the higher the risk I am bearing, the higher the equity I should have. The more the roles I am playing, the higher the equity I should have. The more responsibilities I am handling, the higher the equity that I should have. So it's nothing about sentiment. I know typically you find that the person who comes up with the idea has more equity. Now, and that's because of the investment, and it's considered that whoever conceptualizes the startup puts in more time, invests more into it. So you want to consider these three things. And something else you want to look at is the five. I gave five criteria for choosing a co-founder when we're talking about the co-founder agreement. This also comes to play in equity. Also comes to play valuable contribution, which will fall also under the whole risk umbrella. Skill set and experience, network, potential future contribution, and the ability to work together. Why ability to work together comes in here, because if you are unable to work together, you are going to split. The person is living with their equity. So you need to consider that. You need to consider that also. So, but first of all, what's equity? Now, equity refers to ownership stakes in a company. Ownership stakes in a company, and that's why it's measured in terms of percentage. So the company as a whole is 100%, has 100% equity. So if I have 20% equity in the company, means I own 20% of the company. If I say I own 50% of the company, whatever the value of the company is, for example, if we are winding up the company, whatever assets are available, all things sorted out to the right procedure, I'm entitled to 20% of the company, right? And when we talk about companies, limited liability companies for startups, there's something we call share capital. So, in the practical sense of it, what you own is not the company abstract. So, what you own is shares of the company. In Nigeria, let's take Nigeria for example. So, in registering a company, you're asked to have a minimum share capital, right? And your share capital refers to the total worth of the company or the total undertaking by the shareholders of the company, right? So if I have 20% in the equity of the company, it means I own 20% of the total shares of the company. So if the share capital of the company is 10 million, register the share capital of 10 million, that means I own how much? 2 million in it, right? Now, why all of this is important, because in situations, for example, where the company wants to declare dividends, right? Or the company wants to do some profit sharing for shareholders and the rest of it. In cases of sale, acquisition of the company, proper terms, the company is acquired, the proceeds from the acquisition is going to be paid out to shareholders based on the shareholding. That's why it's very important. And for decision making, there's something called majority shareholders and minority shareholders. So the higher shares you have, the lower shares you have more say in the company's policy. So you see something to be very, very careful. You don't want to give someone too much power in the startup, too much ownership in the startup, unless you are very, very sure. Founders who get this whole equity issue wrong, they lose friendships, right? It can cause loss of friendship. You can get kicked out of your own company even if you give out too much equity to other founders and they combine together. At the end of the day, you being the minority shareholder, you can be kicked out of the company. And we see these issues arise a lot, especially when investors start coming into the startup.